those of you who don't know me, my name is Michael and I work on the community support team at AsIAm. Tonight's seminar is on the topic of autism and socializing, and I'm delighted to say we have two excellent speakers. Our first speaker tonight is Purple Ella. Purple Ella is an autistic speaker and an online content creator on YouTube and TikTok and other various social media platforms. Ella received her autism diagnosis late in life and is also the mother of autistic children. And most recently, Ella has been diagnosed with ADHD. Ellen is passionate about researching neurodivergence and finding strategies to help neurodivergent people live happy lives. And she also wants neurodivergent people to feel that they are enough just the way they are. And our second speaker tonight is Joan Mcdonald, a very familiar face to the autism community and a very good friend of AsIAm, and she's joining us from the west of Ireland in County Clare. Joan offers support and training to autistic people in schools and in businesses. She has worked as a second level teacher, both in mainstream and autism classes, as a trainer manager and in adult day services, and also has worked in a previous life as a CNO. Joan currently works as Positive and has created the popular Positine and Positive adult programs to help people understand their autism and the importance of the autistic community. Following her own autism assessment, Joan set up the organisation Autistic Paddies, which is a meetup group for autistic adults in Ireland, which currently has over 500 members. So, guys, I'm very delighted to have you both here, both from different parts of the world. And as I said, our first speaker tonight is Purple Ella. So I will hand over to you now, Ella, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Hello, let me just get my presentation up. Oh no, it's not at the beginning. It's all going wrong already. Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
Right. Hi, yeah, so I've been invited to talk, as we both have, about autism and friendship, which I was really pleased to do because it's definitely an aspect of my autism that I think, particularly as an autistic woman, has been a challenging thing all of my life. And I think there's a common misconception that autistic people are kind of somehow loners and don't really want that social interaction. And that's definitely not true for me. So I have spent quite a lot of my life figuring out how to make friendships work. So it's great to get half an hour to talk about that. So my kind of experience is that, in early friendships through childhood, secondary school, university, early 20s, I basically found navigating friendship really challenging and got into a lot of unsuitable friendships, got bullied, got manipulated, got taken advantage of, made mistakes myself and messed up friendships and generally kind of struggled. And then I was diagnosed as autistic at the age of 36, so that was 6 years ago now, and that helped me to learn about the ways in which A, I was going wrong in terms of navigating friendship, and B, I was kind of accepting other people doing it wrong in terms of what I was doing in terms of personal boundaries. So now I've learned to navigate friendships in a really balanced, healthy way. And I've got a really close circle of really lovely friends, many of whom are also neurodivergent, I would add, which has made a really positive difference to my life, expanded my circle in terms of like friendship, but also support, and been really valuable. So when I was thinking about writing this presentation, I was thinking about the kind of things that I think are a barrier for autistic adults trying to navigate friendship. And the first thing that I thought of was that sort of vulnerability, in that I feel that I can be quite trusting, I can be quite quick to jump into an intense friendship, I can be quite easily manipulated, to be honest with you. I think partly because I'm, as I said, quite trusting, and partly because I have been so keen to get people to like me that I've been kind of willing to do things that maybe I shouldn't have been willing to do to make that happen. And that can lead to us being quite socially isolated. And I think one of the other aspects that I found difficult when I was navigating friendship is recognizing level of relationship, as in, do I treat someone who is a person in a shop that's just serving me and selling me my potatoes? I don't know why potatoes, just for the purpose of today, they're selling me potatoes, or my best friend, and I'm basically treating everyone exactly the same because I didn't really quite get that that's not how you navigate friendship successfully. Difficulty maintaining relationships because of expectations placed on you when you're in a friendship, and the difficulties navigating that when you've got executive functioning issues and you're having enough difficulty getting it together to get yourself through the day without having to remember a whole other person's needs that you need to be responsive to because you are in a friendship, which leads on to sort of the social energy accounting side of that. I'm going to go into all of these in more detail through the presentation, but the other one is kind of, as an autistic person who also has ADHD and also has a physical disability, I also have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I have a lot of needs, but my friends also have needs. And how do you navigate that? I've got needs. How does this work kind of aspect of friendship? Then there's the also really common and possibly you would expect to be top of the list, the fact that autistic people have a different socializing style than neurotypicals, and are left with the choice really, if we're trying to fit in with neurotypicals, of either masking and trying to be as neurotypical or being authentic and hoping for the best. And then there's the fact that there's so much, whenever you hear about autism and friendship, you know, it's these terribly isolated autistic people who must help have friendships. And I know autistic people who are like, I'm quite fine on my own, playing on my Xbox or doing my Lego or building my model railway. Actually, thank you very much. And that is okay. You know, there's no kind of obligation to have lots of social stuff going on. Okay, so yeah, when I was talking about vulnerability, I think bullying, people taking advantage of us. I've had people taking money from me. I've had definitely people draining time from me. I've found myself in situations where I've been prioritizing a friend's drama over my children's needs or my husband's needs because I wasn't quite sure how to say no, you know, that kind of vulnerability, right through to sort of really dangerous stuff where you could be getting conned. And I think that my kind of advice on protecting yourself is to take relationships slowly. So I think one of the things that I tended to do because of my struggles navigating friendship was to jump into deep relationships quite quickly before I really knew who I was dealing with. And then to tolerate difficult behavior because I didn't want to not have any friends. And I've learned that actually, and I'll get into this later, navigating from acquaintance up to friend or close friend is a series of steps that takes time and involves you getting to know who you're dealing with in greater detail before you're giving too much of yourself away. And so I think taking relationships slowly is always a really good idea for that reason, to avoid potentially being manipulated. And then what's also really important is personal boundaries. I had like no personal boundaries pre-autism diagnosis. I didn't even know that there was such a thing as personal boundaries and that I was allowed to have personal boundaries. And so since learning about how to both have personal boundaries and how to implement personal boundaries, that's made navigating friendships so much easier, because you can go into a friendship with like, this is something that I won't be able to tolerate because this is a boundary of mine. And likewise, a friend can be like, and here are my boundaries. And so as an autistic person, that's like a set of rules for how to navigate that person, which is brilliant and makes it a lot easier to deal with. And in addition to that, my final bit of advice on this would be to work on self-esteem, because when we have high self-esteem, we are more willing to implement personal boundaries, more willing to take the risk of taking relationships slowly and potentially losing some of them, and more resilient when relationships don't work. So self-esteem is just at the bottom of everything, really. I can't go into great detail about every little aspect of this, but I have made videos on nearly all of these topics, including personal boundaries and how to develop them and how to implement them. And they're all available for free on my YouTube channel. So I'll just touch on stuff like this. And then if you want to know about something I mentioned in more detail, just head over there and check that out, because I always run out of time and I'm going to get through today's PowerPoint. It's going to happen. Yeah. And then I think the social isolation, there are multiple reasons why autistic people might spend time on their own, and not all of them are that they can't make friends. Some autistic people would prefer to be on their own. Some autistic people lack the confidence to go out and make friends, and then we go back to the self-esteem building. Some autistic people have a difficult time communicating with neurotypical people. Some people are isolated because they've had previous really negative experiences and they're a little bit scared to put them out there. Some people don't really know where to find friends, how to access social activities and social contacts, and I feel like I should give you some advice about these things, but I appear to have just made a slide in which I just talk about why people get isolated, so that's super helpful. But I'm sure the next bit will be. Yeah, so one of the things, I think this is really important, so I'm going to give myself time to do this properly. One of the things that I did not get at all before I was diagnosed with autistic was that you treat different people who are on different levels of relationship with you differently. So I would genuinely go in and talk to the head teacher at my child's school, my doctor, a policeman, the same way that I would talk to my best mate. Like, just like how now I'm probably a little bit more informal than one should be when giving a public presentation, but it's good because I'm fine with that now. But it was really useful for me to learn about and to categorize initially the types of personal sort of friendship type relationships that I might be in. So what I did at the time when I had this revelation, which was probably about 4 or 5 years ago now, was made a list of different types of relationships, and I'm going to explain them to you now. So an acquaintance is someone that you just happen to see around. Perhaps you see them in the queue at the post office, perhaps you see them at the doctor's, perhaps you see them in your choir, but they always sit on the other side of the room. They're someone that is a kind of feature of your life, but you don't really interact with them a huge amount. A good acquaintance is someone who you see coincidentally, maybe they're in your choir, maybe you see them in the post office, but if you saw them, you'd kind of go over and have a chat with them. So you're not kind of making plans to see them, or they're not a part of any part of your life apart from the place that you see them. But I had a separate category for that because I thought those people were friends. Those people aren't friends, they're still acquaintances. And then when one of those good acquaintanceships starts to go well, and you feel like you're vibing, it can turn into an emerging friendship, which is where you kind of go, oh, should we meet for coffee? Yeah, that'd be nice. And you go for a coffee and you kind of check out whether or not that friendship's going to work. A little bit like dating, I suppose. And then if that all works out well, then you've got yourself a friendship. Brilliant, good job. I felt really proud the first time I'd figured out these stages and deliberately made a friend using these steps. And she's still my friend now, so that went well. And then for a very few very special people, you'll just connect and it'll be brilliant, and you'll be there for each other through the crises and through the highs and lows. This is the person that you call in the middle of the night because you something happened. I don't know, I can't think of a reason right now. Close friends. And it's really, in my opinion, impossible to maintain more than a couple of close friendships, as well as meeting my own and my family's needs. I suppose if I didn't have kids and a husband, I might have room for a couple more. So then from that, I actually made a list because this isn't weird. This is totally normal. I made a list of my friends and people that I knew and kind of put them into categories. Again, so normal to do this. And that really helped me learn how to navigate, because then I sort of kind of understood what information, because prior to this, I would tell everyone my life story. Now, some of you might say, well, Ella, you tell everyone your life story anyway. We've seen you on the internet. You're an oversharer. And that's true, but I still retain some, believe it or not, some privacy. And understanding this helped me to understand who to share what information with and on what level to expect our friendship and what to expect from that friendship. So I hope that's useful for you too. And then there's the whole executive functioning side of managing relationships, like people have inconvenient things like birthdays that you're possibly supposed to remember, and you're also supposed to potentially get in touch reasonably regularly so they know that you're thinking of them, and all of this kind of stuff is a good way to make people feel heard and cared about, but it's really hard, especially if you've also got ADHD. But even with autism and the executive functioning difficulties, I've just found this one a bit of a problem. So I've navigated it in a number of ways. First of all, I set expectations low on whether or not I'm going to remember people's birthdays. I'm like, you don't have to remember mine. I'm not going to remember yours. It's all good. And so that's fine. In terms of staying in touch, I tried a few different systems. I tried a spreadsheet because, again, it's totally normal to put your friends in a spreadsheet and figure out who to contact next. So I had a spreadsheet of my friends and would like rotate who to text. When I felt like texting someone, I'd be like, who's next? Who haven't I contacted for a while? But then word got out about my spreadsheet. People thought it was weird, so I've moved on from that. And now what I do is I keep all of my texts. And so that means that all of my friends have texted me at some point, and I can easily see who I haven't been in touch with for a while by looking at the bottom of my text list and going, oh, there's the last that this is someone I haven't been in touch with for ages, and kind of rotating through like that. I'm still not going to claim that I've done particularly well on managing the executive functioning side of friendships, but I've definitely found the text system a good way to remember who to contact when I have the social energy to contact someone and see them. Yeah, which moves me on nicely to how do you navigate all of this, figuring out what categories your friends are in and when their birthdays are and when to text them, whilst not becoming overloaded and having meltdowns and shutdowns. And this is a big problem for me because I am extremely sociable and I love spending time with people, and I'm really brilliant at completely overscheduling myself socially and then having multiple meltdowns because I've become completely overloaded by the experience, especially since I talk so much, that's a lot of social energy that I'm putting out. So I have tried to start approaching the energy I spend on socializing using the energy accounting strategy. I'm not sure whether everyone will have heard of this, so I'm going to explain it really briefly. And if you want to know more, again, I've made a whole video about energy accounting, but this was someone else's idea. This wasn't my idea. I can't remember who it was. I should really remember that so I can thank them when I do these things. But anyway, the basic idea is that you allocate how much, you work out how much energy social encounters take from you, and that might vary depending on who the social encounter is with and what location that is in. So my very best friend in my back garden having a cup of tea is going to be less social energy than someone I don't know as well in a noisy coffee shop, for example. So you kind of work out how much energy these social encounters are going to take from you, and you also need to work out how much energy you have each day. So this is like an ongoing process where you work out how much energy you have each day, and then you know how much energy you have available to you, and then you take off the energy that you're going to spend like feeding yourself and showering and going to work and any other commitments you've got, and you then know how much you've got left to spend on social stuff, which means that you will then be able to work out how much social stuff you can fit in each day, each week, or each month. It's best to look over a couple of weeks, I think, in my experience, before committing to social stuff. And you can also then work out what might help put energy back in after a social encounter to kind of keep that balance healthy. So it might be that you find that if you have a social encounter, then coming home and spending half an hour on your special interest kind of gets you back to where you need to be to keep functioning. Yeah, and it's okay to be honest with your friends, because if they're really your friends, they're going to be supportive of this, about how much time you can spend socializing. So I will quite often say to people, I am going to be able to socialize for about an hour and a half today, because if you don't put I've found if you don't put a time on how long the encounter will be, it's easy for it to go on for longer than you've really planned, and for you to feel overloaded before you leave. So I find this is not uptight. I absolutely promise you, again, completely not uptight, but I like to figure that out. Having said that, I have somehow managed this week, I've somehow managed to put 6 social things into like 3 days when I was trying to do energy accounting. So it's really hard to actually put it into practice, but it's definitely worth aspiring to, in my opinion. It's never perfect, but it's worth aspiring to. Okay, so then this is the other big topic, really, in terms of navigating friendships. So this is kind of different if your friends are also neurodivergent, but my experience is that in friendships, you have 3 options. Your first option is to work really hard, learn all the neurotypical social rules, mask the hell out of it, and follow the social rules and try and fit in. And that, in my opinion, is a very, very bad idea, because you will potentially end up with significant mental health problems, overload, meltdowns. Just not good. It doesn't work for me anyway. Or you go out there like, hey, I'm autistic, and you stim and you do your thing and you just be autistic, which is great. And I wish it were possible to do that all the time. However, I think, because also what I find is, I really hope I'm making sense, sorry. Let me just breathe in. What I find is when you talk to neurotypical people about masking, they go, yeah, but everyone does that. everyone puts a little bit of a, you know, nobody's the same with every one person, and it kind of got me thinking and made me realize that they're wrong, and neurotypical masking is not the same as autistic masking. And here's the major difference. Autistic masking is trying to adjust every aspect of yourself to fit in, because you've usually at some point in your life drawn the conclusion that your authentic way of being is not acceptable, labels you as weird, means you don't fit in, and that you need to change X, Y, and Z to try and be this particular shape, to fit this particular box, so that you can fit in. And it's painful and it's overloading. Neurotypical masking is just not oversharing with the dentist, and having a certain way that you speak to a teacher over, you know, exactly what I was saying really about the sort of navigating the different types of relationships. So I've decided that what seems to work for me is to like mask on a neurotypical level, as in, I don't need to share everything about myself with everyone. I don't need to stim necessarily personally in, say, I don't know, I can't think, I like stimming everywhere. I can't think of a good example. And also because what I do for a living means everyone knows I'm autistic, I can't think of a good example, but there might be times when I need to modify my behavior just to make things a little bit easier in a certain situation for a short amount of time, but not in a way that's gonna, not if it's in a way that's going to cause me to be overloaded. So stimming's not a very good example. It's a terrible example. Stim wherever you want to. Let me think of a better example. Yeah, I might not make jokes like weird jokes that I like to make all the time if I am talking to someone I've only just met, that kind of level, just slightly adjusting, being who I am, but slightly adjusting what's actually coming out of my mouth in order to navigate the world without having to deal with potentially that being difficult. I'm really not sure I made sense of this slide. I really hope I did, but there you go. I gave it a go. Okay, and oh, I'm 5 minutes early. Look at me. I was so desperately trying not to be late that I'm 5 minutes early. Okay, I'm trying to think was there anything I talked about slowly? No, well, is there any?
That's okay, Ella. We do have a number of questions coming in, but we will leave the questions till the Q&A till after Joan has spoken. So thanks very much. That there was lots of great tips, and I'm sorry, I know there was a bit of time pressure with regards, you know, the amount of information that you were trying to get in such a short space of time. But there was lots of good tips there on navigating friendships and working on one's self-esteem and managing relationships. That phrase that you've kind of captured with regards accounting, social accounting, like, you know, having certain times allotted for certain things. I think we could all benefit from that sometimes. But no, there was lots of really good tips there, and I hope people enjoyed your presentation. If people do have questions, do put them in the Q&A box, and we will get to them at the end. So without further ado, then I might introduce our second speaker, as I said, Joan Mcdonald, who's well used to presenting for AsIAm at this stage. So Joan, if that's okay, I might hand it over to you now.
That's fine. Thanks, Michael. And gosh, thanks, Ella. Were you inside my head or something? That was amazing. I've done so many things the same as you have done. And I have my little list for when I need to contact friends. And then I just don't have the social energy, and I don't. So apologies, friends. But thanks to people in AsIAm for inviting me along to talk about autistic adults and socializing. And I guess I was asked mainly because of Autistic Paddies. You can see the logo for them on the bottom right. But I work as positive. So I work with people of all ages who are autistic. But Autistic Paddies I do for fun. Michael has already introduced me, so that's just John on the right is my brother. He is sort of classically autistic. He needs a lot of help to do lots of things every day, and I didn't know I was autistic until about 5 years ago. But you've got the rest of it from Michael earlier on. So what I want to look at this evening is a few questions. Number one, do autistic people want to socialize at all? Because sometimes people think we're the people living in our garrets, not mixing with anybody at all. And because we mightn't have social energy, people think that we don't want to socialize. So I just want to have one little chance at addressing that question. Secondly, is autistic socializing different? Can't we all just hang out together, autistic, non-autistic? Because Autistic Paddies is a group for autistic people only. And prove it, there's a little bit of research on autistic socializing. So I'm going to remind people of that if they haven't seen it before. Then to talk a little bit about what does our socializing look like? Does it happen in Ireland? Yeah. And what maybe our next steps might be. First of all, if you're autistic and you tell somebody you're autistic, people come up with all these ideas that they might not say to you, but they can think very negative things about you. So I pretty much always use this slide, but sadly, it's almost always true. People assume you're a loner and have no empathy and you're cold and you're unsociable and all those horrible things. Now, can you imagine if you're growing up as an autistic child and people know you're autistic? Kids use it as an insult in school nowadays. How that might make you feel. So it doesn't always feel fun to be an autistic person. If things go wrong, you tend to get blamed a little bit. So this is also a possibility for being autistic, but not many autistic people come across that. And in the POSO teen courses I run, which are to support teenagers who are going to be the adults of the next generation, I support them to just understand being autistic and enjoy and accept being autistic. And so we look at more the positive side, as well as some of the negatives as well of being autistic. So these can be our traits as well. And oftentimes it's the first time they've ever come across that. So naturally, if autistic is negative, you're going to be on friendships with others anyway, regardless of whatever your primary presentation is as an autistic person. Secondary, people are going to think, oh, they're autistic, therefore they're all those negative things, when actually we're all these positive things too. So how do we socialize? First of all, we can be quite nervous if people know we're autistic because of what I've just said, but we do tend to have a different communication style. We tend to communicate about things we love. I actually like the odd question about the weather. My father, who's on screen tonight, was a weather forecaster, so that's okay. But Irish people talk about the weather and go on and on and on about soaps and football matches and situations. We prefer mostly to talk about the things we're actually interested in. And if we're interested in you and your family, that's great. We'll talk away about that. Otherwise, it's harder for us. We have a different social understanding as well. So all the subtle stuff that neurotypicals tend to do, we sometimes can miss it. Unless we've made it a particular interest and focus on it, in which case we may be really famous psychologists. But we do socialize and notice things differently and have different values and value honesty more than most people. We have sensory differences. So, for example, when I saw the name of this talk, Autistic Socializing, most Irish people think socializing means going to the pub and having pints. It's a word used for going to the pub and having pints. It isn't just meeting each other. Whereas for some autistic people, that could be almost impossible and really horrible. So sensory differences mean a lot of us can't go to the pub. Or sensory differences mean if we're in a conversation with more than one or two other people, we just can't handle the flow. Or sensory differences mean that bright lights can just be too much for us. Or that we might love the sound of a band, but going to a concert might just completely overload us. And then Ella has talked about the time we need to relax after that. So with other autistic people, they understand that. And Ella has also spoken about camouflaging and masking. And I really enjoyed the difference between camouflaging a bit to be like a neurotypical and then the very definite autistic masking being what you are not. That all comes from maybe a shame from being different. The word ableism, that it's considered better to be part of the majority always, and the majority aren't autistic. The majority are neurotypical and socialize neurotypically, so therefore we are wrong. I just saw a lovely quote about when autistic people first began to be able to socialize really was with the advent of the internet, because we were a rare breed then. People didn't know how many of us were out there. And somebody made the point that instead of having to socialize with your words, because you were on the internet and you didn't have to wait for posts, etc., you could socialize pretty rapidly with your thoughts. And so suddenly it gave people who didn't have access to words a much better way to socialize with each other. Also, in autistic community, we understand that there are often invisible other needs, like EDS, that's Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and that can cause awful joint pain for people, and people are often dyspraxic. People often have, my teenagers I work with think autism is anxiety, so often have this underlying anxiety. There's all this other stuff going on with autistic people pretty much all the time. And I hate to say it, but boredom. So when we are in neurotypical conversations and they're going over the same thing over again, it can be quite boring. Just as sometimes neurotypicals say, oh, you're talking about this thing all the time. I think when I talk about autism, I bore a lot of people, but not autistic people, so I found my tribe. But I get bored by neurotypical conversation. I'm sorry for saying that in front of people I know, because I know people are watching this, but this is the case. We have to be real. And that picture there is a picture of one of our Autistic Paddies activities, which was a treasure hunt. It was a photo somebody put up of the things they'd got in their treasure hunt. So when COVID first started, we did treasure hunts, and it was quite fun. This is the research that talks a little bit about autistic socializing, because again, I mean, even our definition, we have social communication difficulties or disabilities and restrictive repetitive behaviors. That's what autism is, according to the manuals that are completely out of date as far as I can see with any autistic person I've ever met. So this was done in 2019. Catherine Crompton over in the University of Edinburgh did some research comparing autistic people, non-autistic people, and then an autistic group mixed with a non-autistic group. And just her research, based on various social things, but one of the things was stuff like Chinese whispers type stuff. And she wanted to see, well, if you did your Chinese whispers, you know, where you whisper something to the first person and they pass it to the next and the next. And as well as having good hearing, there's also kind of a connection involved with the person. They found that when this was done, that when autistic people were together, they did pretty well. And when non-autistic people were together, they did pretty well. There wasn't too much of a statistical difference between them. So autistic people were getting on really well with each other. Non-autistic people were getting on really well with each other. But when they mixed the groups, suddenly this was in Chinese whispers. So there are differences, maybe even that haven't fully been measured yet, between autistic and non-autistic people, and we socialize differently. It's interesting because at the moment, Jessica Kingsley, the autism publisher, has a big conference going on, and it's when you buy the ticket, you get access to it for another fortnight. And I'm finding I'm just drawn and can take in more from the talks from the autistic people and not from the non-autistic people. And I don't know in advance who all of them are. I know a lot of them. But anyway, so this was showing something about autistic socializing, autistic meeting. She did a little more. Then got outsiders to observe triads, an autistic and a non-autistic person together, or two autistic people together, or a mixed group. And this was really interesting. So they had to rate what they saw on videos of interactions between people. There were volunteers who volunteered for the interaction. They rated it for what seemed like enjoyment, what seemed like ease, what seemed like success, what seemed like friendliness, what seemed like awkwardness. And on those ratings, autistic people with autistic people, that's the green line, came out as being more apparently engaged in the friendship, in the connection, than either the non-autistic group or the mixed group. Not surprisingly, the mixed group was the least successful. So there is now research that shows that autistic people actually communicate and socialize well. This was the outcome. In essence, what we are demonstrating for the first time is that autistic people's social behavior includes effective communication and effective social interaction in direct contradiction of the diagnostic criteria for autism. So we are innocent of what we have been told we were guilty of for social communication. We have for the first time uncovered empirical evidence that there is a form of social intelligence that is specific to autistic people. So what to do about that? Why would we like autistic space? Because we're accepted for ourselves when we're with other autistic people. We don't need to mask. And then when we're with people and don't need to mask, we can get our own insight into our strengths and limitations instead of trying to be somebody different. It's also such a relief to be with other autistic people and to unmask and to just be yourself. And the funny thing is, whenever I'm with an autistic group, I'm quite noise sensitive. The noise, the life, the creative, supportive, empathetic communication can be quite, but exhausting too. So these people who might be the quietest in a group of non-autistic people, suddenly when we find our tribe, it works out pretty well. And there's less of the double empathy gap. I didn't say no. The double empathy gap is what an autistic researcher, Damien Milton, defined as the fact that when people said autistic people had no empathy, which was one of the worst lies told about us, I have to say, he was saying, well, look, people say we've no empathy, but that's because they don't get us. So they think we don't get them, and that's a problem, but they don't get us either. So I'm saying there's less among autistic people. There's still some, because there's an empathy gap between people who are thinking their own thoughts. My first autistic space was Autscape, a holiday in the UK. First time everybody there is either autistic or is able to handle autistic space. If you want to find out exactly how it's done, the Autscape handbook is freely available online, and I recommend it to anybody who wants to meet autistic people anywhere, because it is quite detailed, as autistic people tend to be, and explains about how autistic space might be created. That in autistic space you are not special. We do our best to meet everybody's needs, but it's not that you're the only autistic person, which you might be in other space. and it's where autistic people can be free to be themselves without being judged or excluded. So when I first found out I was autistic, I had studied for a master's in Birmingham and met English autistic people there and heard about Autiscape. So as soon as I found out, I went over to England, and then I came back to Ireland, and it was just so lonely not having autistic people around anymore that I really wanted to have that kind of a space. And you might say, what does it look like? People wear communication badges or initiation badges. Here's a very boring one. I have a few examples here. We just wear these to show what kind of communication we want. And the white badge means, because it can be very awkward when you meet 400 other people, and some of them maybe you want to meet them from last year again, but you just don't know what to say or do. So the communication badge is white, is I can totally manage my own communication. Green when you wear it, and you can alternate these badges throughout the day. Green is I'd love to interact, but I really don't know where to fit in. I'm a bit shy. Please come and talk with me. Yellow is prior permission, so only friends. And of course, when you're meeting at Autiscape for the first time in a year, you have to negotiate. And then red means I'm here, I want to be here, but do not approach me. So it takes away an awful lot of the social stresses of what happens when you meet other people. Because it's a conference, people are there with cameras and all sorts. The little badge at the bottom is a combination of all the other signs they have. You can see on the white badge there's a pink book, and that book is whether people are allowed to record you or not. And there's also then there was a same size badge with an orange teddy bear. You can see his head at the bottom there. That was whether people were allowed to ask you for a hug or not, because some people are very huggy and some people are very unhuggy. And I think the black one that's making the body of my teddy there was a camera for if people are allowed to ask to take your picture. So there are all things that make autistic space a little bit safer. And again, because neurotypicals seem to need to talk a lot, as do Ella and I, but that's another story. I've got this from the book Loud Hands. My silence is in fact a compliment. It means I'm being my natural self. There were rooms at Autiscape where people gathered because they wanted to be together, and they only communicated on their devices. There were silent rooms, and people were engaging. It wasn't even they were playing computer games, they were actually talking. And that sometimes suits people who don't want to use words. So I wanted that back in Ireland. At least I wanted to meet other autistic people. So in September 2017, I set up the Autistic Paddies, which is on a Facebook group just. And it started off with 7 people. The last time I checked today, it had 545 people. And it's an online, we call it safe space for autistic chat. It's for support, for understanding, and for actual meetups when we're not in a pandemic. And also, it seems to be a really successful peer support model. Why? Because we have bucket loads of empathy for each other. Now, we've grown so big at the moment, it's brought its own issues, which I'll go into. But a lot of people say it is the only place to go to on the internet. And it's a place where they really feel at home and feel understood. So what do we do in Autistic Paddies? And what do we talk about? First of all, we talk about you can check from outside to see how many messages there are, but you can't see people in, and it's around about 1,000 messages a month, but it's gone higher than that now. So we talk about mental health because a lot of people are struggling. College, homelessness. We are online friends, and it's from the Autistic Paddies I've become to recognise the value of online friends, even though it's much nicer to meet people in real life too. But we share achievements, stress, worries, advice. I don't know quite where we would actually fit in Ella's categories, which I wrote down there, but I think we'd probably go into the somewhere between good acquaintance and friendship, and some people have found close friendships from the group. We offer initiation and organisation supports. If you're autistic, and especially you can be overlapping with dyspraxia as well, or ADHD, it can be really hard to get things done, and especially now living on our own. So sometimes we just open up a room on Facebook where we don't talk, but we just say, I'm going to do X, and everybody just works together on their task. It's like being in a library until they're done. We might have a coffee at the end. We discuss sensory overload. We discuss how we make autistic community. We discuss jobs, family responsibilities, mental distress. I've put that in twice, which that literally shows what a big deal it is. We discuss burnout, and we also discuss the lack of diagnosis and the lack of aftercare in Ireland. Basically, Autistic Paddies is the aftercare in Ireland, which is pretty bad. And the thoughts you had and the words you said, because you were wrong in so many ways. Everyone said so. That's an autistic father of 3 neurodivergent children, and so his children are going to grow up with a more accepting and tolerant atmosphere than he grew up in, not knowing why he was wrong, when actually he wasn't wrong, he was different. Or another person about community. For the first time in my life, I feel comfortable in my own skin and accepted by a community of people. I will be forever grateful. So that's how much the group can mean to people. What do we do? We did into a couple of conferences. I think one on the left was the AsIAm conference in Malahide a couple of years ago, and the two people there aren't autistic paddies at all. They're friends of ours from Autiscape in England who came over because we are that close. And then the one on the bottom right is the AsIAm conference another time, and you can see Steve Silverman there, who's neither autistic nor an autistic paddy, but it was nice to have him there, and then some of our members. We had a Halloween gathering in my house. We've been to Bura Bog. We had one of the best things in my mind is our autistic picnic, where sorry, it didn't happen in 2019. We had a Phoenix Park, and I just, would anybody like to do anything? And we had an afternoon of the most amazing creative performances by people who just volunteered, because there is so much talent in autistic people. And then the last big meetup we had was Jodie O'Neill's play, What I Don't Know About Autism. And as far as I understand, that's going to be out there again. It sold out everywhere it went in February 2020 and then had to stop because of COVID. It's a play with songs that she's written about autism with a half autistic cast, and along the way of designing it, she linked in and out with Autistic Paddies and I'm sure other autistic people as well. And it's amazing. So these are the kind of things we did pre-2020. We also did hill walking and met in lots of coffee shops. And in Dublin, it was a hotspot for dating at one point. I live in Clare and I missed all that. But all these things were happening pre-COVID. What did we do since COVID? Since COVID, I've noticed themselves out there to support everybody else, which is really nice. So we've done things like we've had gaming nights, that's the Kahoot at the bottom. We've had lightning talks, which are very short talks for 5 minutes by about 6 to 8 people, and then questions at the end. They're really successful. My favourite last year was Autism 2020, when the Eurovision was cancelled. We have an awful lot, this was my silly idea, we have so many people in the group who are atypically gendered, and I know that gay people like Eurovision, and so that's a big statement. So I thought, well, we'll have Autism, and it was quite amazing. Crazy stuff, and it was a wonderful night, and I'm really sorry I gave nobody any trophies even though I promised to, but it was a great night and I hope we'll do it again. Also, because it's a group to do with autism, we always have cat pictures, because that's really important if you're autistic. It should really be part of the diagnostic criteria for autism. Strong opinions about cats, generally loving them. We also have every now and again a language exchange with our friends in Nantes, and Bastien is here tonight, so we speak Franglais, and that's our bottom language exchange, and we link up with Bastien's group in Nantes. I've stolen this picture from one of our members. I've already mentioned our accountability buddies, where we just have a meetup online where we don't talk and do stuff. And then people always put up jokes. And another of our highlights in the top right last summer, this is like showing the family album, the Autistic Pride Picnic. And so we have an Autistic Pride Alliance that does that. That's autistic people all over the world, mainly all over the English-speaking world so far, who on Autistic Pride Day, June 18th, share. We normally had picnics, we couldn't do it last year, so we shared a 13-hour stream from all over the world, and Autistic Paddies were a part of that. So that's kind of the stuff that we do, and I'm just checking time, we're still okay. The really interesting thing this year has been the amount of groups blossoming from the Autistic Paddies, and it's a joy to see, because we have grown an awful lot. We have got maybe almost too big for our initial purpose. And so first of all, just the red words there, people set up other little side groups on Messenger or on Discord. So we had our Harry Potter heads. We have Pokemon Go, where we meet to raid together. Pokemon Go people will know what that means. We have D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. That seems to be going every Thursday. It's so big now that I don't even know what happens in all these groups all the time, because other people are running them, because so many people have come forward to help. And we have a Discord group as well. We also have the pink one there. There's no right way to feel right now. That's the Autistic and Garden. You see there's the AutPads rather than Autistic Paddies. When the group was first set up, I kind of wanted to do it in a kind of a niggers with attitude kind of way, that autistic is such a dirty word for so many people. I wanted to say we're Autistic Paddies in a kind of a devil-may-care kind of a way. But I'm realising more and more that some people who aren't originally from Ireland feel that that might exclude them, or some people who are older remember being called a paddy in the 70s. But because we've got so many groups bouncing off us, we seem to be a launch pad for lots of things. So just partly because it's easier to say, we tend to call ourselves AutPad a lot of the time now. But these are some of the groups, parent guardians. So that's for autistic parents of autistic children to discuss basically how to manage the system that we live in Ireland. We also have a book club, and it's a really interesting book club because, again, it's autistic friendly, partly because of the admin of that group who's just very gentle, but also because we don't pick a group every month. Every month we come together and we talk about what we are reading and loving ourselves. So it's all individual, and we put up the books we've read, and that may encourage other people to read them too. I'm proud to say that just in January, my first book was to read the bullet journal book, and I've been bullet journaling. So there's a minor little community of bullet journalers now, and that's helping us organize our lives. But two of the more exciting things that have moved off our group but that are happening, and there's another one on the next page. First of all, there's the Out Loud blog, outloud.ie. It's come from people meeting in our group, but now I think the main core group are still from our group, but it's going to grow bigger than that. It's a really exciting blog that's autistic people writing about autism in Ireland, and they've got a really super website. And me, with my executive functioning difficulties, I couldn't quite get over how they organize themselves and put it all together. So if you check outloud.ie, this is going to be getting bigger and bigger, and it's already really good. It's got loads about just being autistic in Ireland and in general. And I think I mentioned empathy at the beginning. They have a nice little piece about empathy. Plus, what I haven't mentioned is so many people all of the people in our group have to be on Facebook and have to be on Facebook themselves. So we are not representative of all autistic people in Ireland. We're missing loads. I'll come on to that in a while. But one of the other tropes that the Out Loud group tackled lately was about people who don't speak, autistic people who don't speak, and how they absolutely have so much to say in different ways. And you can check their blog for that. But the other thing I'm really excited about, and I never even asked Zoe who runs it when she started it, again, this is not from Autistic Paddies, although you can see in the picture at the bottom there, we had, or we still have, I've been pretty burnt out lately and I haven't done everything I've promised to do. We have a set of photos, Autism 1 today. We were going to do it just for April, but there are so many people, we'll just keep doing it. Because some people think autism is a negative thing and they say Autism 1 today. So we thought, what about the positive talents of the autistic? And Zoe is super creative and super inclusive and has an art club that runs every Friday for all autistic people. So it means even people who might not be able to be online on Facebook, they could be there at home with their materials, which Zoe kindly tells people what to bring during the week, and then they can join the art club on Saturdays. So this is not Autistic Paddy socialisation, but it's other socialisation. And then speaking of other socialisation, there are also other groups in Ireland. We seem to be the biggest one at the moment, but there's a long-standing Dublin group that used to meet in the Longstone Bar, and they're on Discord now. You'll find them on Facebook. There's a long-standing women's group in Cork, and I think they're meeting online. And then there's other groups that are loosely connected with us. There's a group in Galway that we kind of overlap with a lot, and until very recently, until you absolutely couldn't anymore, they used to try and have small meetups. So there's quite a bit going on with autistic people now that wasn't happening at the moment. But I think one of the most exciting things for me, when you're autistic, you're marginalized. A lot of autistic people are doubly marginalized. Autistic Paddies were from the trans community, or certainly the LGBTQIA+ community. And sometimes things would come up in the group that I felt could be hurtful to them. I could even say it myself because I just didn't have the language and the thought processes. So this year, some of the braver people set up the Rainbow Autistics Ireland, which is basically for people who are LGBTQ+ and also autistic. And so, that's a group that's so needed. It start off, and now it's not connected to Autistic Paddies, so the people who aren't members can join, because maybe people discover their LGBT+ identity before they're quite sure about being autistic. So I'm really excited that exists, and that's a hard picture to not find, so you'll find that on Facebook as well. All these groups are on Facebook, except the Out Loud blog. It's on Facebook too, it's everywhere, but it has a website. So where are we at? Oh dear, that doesn't look right. It looks right when it's on my own slides, but it doesn't come out here. So this is obviously an optician's test. But our current issues. We are growing very big, very fast. And this font grew bigger than I wanted. And it's an issue because initially, everybody who joined, either a friend added them or they asked to join and they came to me. So I had a little conversation. So I knew everybody in the group to some degree until we reached 300 members. Then it became too big for me to manage. And now we have a group of 9 really committed mods. And I've been so burnt out lately that I haven't been a mod. Well, I'm still a mod in name, but I haven't been there since before the weekend. And so other people are managing things on their own. But we're growing so big so fast, people aren't necessarily getting the culture of the group. And people, I'm sure, are lost and are afraid to speak out. Where before we had that conversation, but we're actually doing everything by ourselves. We don't have any state aid. We're just working as volunteers and trying to handle our own lives too. So there might be no personal connection for some. And people monitoring the page are all autistic volunteers, and we are burning out. And also a big thing, we're not reaching autistic people who don't use Facebook at all. And I had really hoped a few years ago, after the AsIAm conference 2 years ago, I kind of hoped to make some connections with parent groups, but we just don't have the time to do it properly. But we need support to do this, so that, you know, I have a vision of maybe this summer, if people actually get to see each other in real life again, wouldn't it be lovely to have lots of little autistic picnics in each county, where autistic adults who are on Facebook could meet up with people who mightn't be on Facebook in some local area and just hang out together. But we don't have the energy to do that right now. And we're not reaching enough people from marginalised communities. That's why I'm so excited about the rainbow autistics. But we don't have enough travellers. We don't have enough people of colour. We don't have enough Muslims. Another hour now before your iftar this evening. I hope you'll enjoy it. We just don't have people from the marginalised communities, and how to reach them is the thing. So our next steps, basically, we need somehow to formalise our group, because as we're doing a nice job with people who are interacting on Facebook, but as I've just said, we're missing so many, and the mods are burning out. And we also need to be part of a national conversation to include autism in all aspects of public services, of employment, of leisure, because our needs sometimes we feel are forgotten. And we also need to seek greater support to link in new members, so people who join us, that we actually have a little welcoming committee, welcoming induction, to ensure everybody has some conversation and feels that their voice can be heard too. Because I think so often all our posts are seen by about 200 people, sometimes up to 300 people in our group of 545. So it's a very active group. Even sometimes groups of members, nobody is active. But I'd say maybe about 30 people post a lot of the time. So I'm afraid others might think we're a clique or their voice doesn't count. And so it's so important to be able to link in with those members. Sometimes things are said and they say people that say things that might trigger other people, might scare them. And sometimes people leave when that happens. We need to be able to link with them afterwards and talk through what happened and say, well, they're still welcome, but just this thing has to stop. We need to be able to link with autistic adults off Facebook and marginalised people. And we also need to campaign for a health service and autistic rights. Right now, I think all of the people who are assessing for autism are sending people to our group. And that's wonderful. But we need counsellors, counselling sessions, because people are struggling during COVID. We cannot keep doing it all. In the beginning, we might have had to recommend Pieta House or Samaritans maybe once every couple of months, once a year. Now it's happening more and more often. So we are doing a lot more than any volunteers should be doing, but we want to do it because it's a good thing, but we need help. So that's really it. If you want to contact me personally, I'm on positivelearning@gmail.com. But if you want to find out about Autistic Paddies, you'll find us on Facebook. So how are we doing time-wise? I think I stole Ella's 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Thank you, Ella. And maybe we go to questions. Oh God, yeah. There's 31 questions. Oh my God.
There's been a filtering of some questions, Joan. Thanks so much for that really comprehensive and detailed presentation. It's great to see and hear that Autistic Paddies has, you know, grown so much, but with that growth comes demand, and as you say, can create a lot of fatigue and tiredness. And some of the comments that are coming into the Q&A box are people congratulating you on the great work that you've done for the autistic adult community over the last couple of years. People have been sharing their stories in the Q&A box as well. But it's also great to see how Autistic Paddies have adapted to the world of COVID, and how you've been very creative in reaching out to people.